Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another week where we are thinking through God's Word together. Glad to have you all along. We are in 1 Timothy chapter 3, and we are finishing up the qualifications for overseers. So I hope this has been worth your time. And at the end here, I'll challenge us a bit on how we go through this. But let's look at what is laid out here. So this is 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 6. And as he's listing what is necessary or required for these men, he says, not a new convert. Not a new convert. It's interesting for those of you who like words. It's the Greek word that's transliterated right over in English as neophyte, newbie, rookie, right? Someone who is new at this. And he says the overseer must not be a new plant. I think the root there comes from this word of planting, a newly planted plant kind of thing. Now, it's interesting in Titus, this requirement is not mentioned. And it's possible that the reason is that in Crete, the church was so young that there weren't a lot of options for men who've been Christians for a while. But here in Ephesus, the church had been around for 10 years or so. And Paul's telling Timothy, don't choose the youngest ones, the newest converts, but choose someone who's been around a little while. I point that out to just say, in general, this has to be a relative term. How do we define what is the new convert, the new believer? And I think I mentioned this last week, but it's worth pondering. If your pool of candidates, of those who aspire to overseer, include several that are older men as opposed to young men, and men who've been in the faith for most of their lives versus men who've just come to faith in the last 5 years or so, it seems wisest and most consistent with what Paul is saying here to the church, or to Timothy, to take the older guys. And it seems like we go the other way. I'll explain that further in here in a minute. So why, Paul? Why not a new convert? Lest, having been puffed up, he may fall into a judgment of the devil. So this phrase, judgment of the devil, is ambiguous. It's capable of two interpretations. It could be translated that he may fall into the devil's judgment. Still ambiguous. The question is Paul speaking of the judgment the devil incurred or a judgment from the devil? Now, you may be of the persuasion that the devil was cast out of heaven because of his pride, and that he, somewhere before the creation of Adam and Eve, rebelled, and he and a bunch of angels rebelled against God, and God cast him down because he was arrogant. I don't see that in Scripture anywhere. I think that's based on a poor translation in the King James of the word in Isaiah it's translated Lucifer. But if that's what you think is happening, then you may think, oh, this idea of being puffed up or prideful, the devil was judged for his pride, so the concern is that that God's going to judge the new convert. It's possible. I don't think so. Linguistically, I don't think so, because this next phrase, this next sentence, he talks about the reproach and snare of the devil. It's the same construction. And down here, it's pretty clear he's talking about the devil is the one who sets the snare, and the devil is the one who brings the reproach. So the parallel structure here of the language moves me to think this judgment is from the devil. Does that make sense? Again, you may not agree with me. That's fine. But that's what makes most sense to me. All right, so I'm going to proceed with that view. So the overseer must not be a new convert, lest, having been puffed up or prideful or arrogant, he falls into judgment from the devil. When a young man or someone new to a belief gets power, there's a temptation to pride. We know this is true. This is true in every setting. A new convert, a young Christian, who now has been given this authority as an overseer, the temptation to wield that authority with arrogance and puffed up, as this translation says, it's just a strong temptation. It doesn't mean only young guys or neophytes are tempted. Old men can be too, but there is a greater temptation. Do you remember the story of when Jesus is walking along with his disciples, his apostles, and they are convinced he's the Messiah. He's about ready to set up his kingdom. And they have this argument with one another. And he says, "Hey, what are you arguing about?" And they say, "Well, we were just wondering, when you come into your kingdom, will you put one of us on your right hand and the other on the left hand?" And of course, one of the Gospels talks about it being the mother who brings that forward to Jesus. Or another occasion, they're talking and arguing about who's the greatest in the kingdom. Who's going to be the greatest? Every time I read that, I shake my head. I think, really? They're so caught up in the kingdom and what it means that they are friends with, they are disciples, they are apostles of the King, the Messiah. He's here. And it leads them straight to this debate about who's the greatest and who gets to sit in the seat of honor. And remember, Jesus has to correct them and say, the great ones in my kingdom are the ones who serve others. On another occasion, it says, don't lord it over those under your charge. That's what the Gentiles do. That's what the pagans do. They rise up with their authority and lord it over those who are their inferiors. Not so with you. And so we see there in the apostles this pride welling up as they begin to ponder what it means that they're going to be something in the kingdom. Well, that happens so often with new converts and especially young men who are given a sense of a place of authority. And Paul says, Timothy, don't pick those men. Don't pick those men. In the second Timothy, in his second letter to Timothy, he's going to say this: the servant of the Lord must not quarrel, but be gentle to all, apt to teach, patient under evil, instructing those opposing in meekness, if perhaps God may give to them conversion to an acknowledging of the truth, that they may awake out of the devil's snare, having been caught by him at his will. We'll get there eventually as we look at 2 Timothy, but this idea of being gentle and patient to evil, young men don't seem to be that way, and new converts. We all know the zeal of the new convert, going around telling everybody the truth, which is great when it comes to just proclaiming the gospel and proclaiming the majesties of Christ. But how quickly can that become arrogance and a lack of gentleness and meekness, especially if you give them authority? I was there, and I'm going to come back to this idea that our current system sets men up for the devil's judgment, which, by the way, I think it means the devil now is bringing the accusation. That's what he does. He's the accuser. Diabolos, devil, is accuser or false accuser. And so now this new convert gets this position of authority, and he doesn't exercise it humbly, but he's tempted to pride. And so now the devil has accusations to throw at him because he is sinning. He is wielding this authority without the wise, self-restrained, gentle application that an older convert and an older man would have. So in our system, where you take a guy out of college or he goes to seminary and he gets trained, he's now an expert because that's what we do in our culture. We think anyone who's been to school for this must be an expert, and we hold experts in such high esteem. He's been trained, he comes on staff, and he's given authority, and he's in his 20s, maybe early 30s, and he's now preaching and teaching what he was taught in seminary, and he's making decisions for the group, and pride wells up so easily. And then he keeps reading theology, and I say this all the time, but he reads the Reformed guys, and they are not typically, that may be an overstatement, but there are plenty who are not gentle and meek with those who disagree. And Reformed theology, and this is true of dispensationalism and others as well, but we have our systems of theology that, this is the truth that we must beat people up with. It's great that you believe in Jesus, that you say you do, but if you don't hold to these things, doctrines of grace, Calvinism, Arminianism does it, dispensationalism, all the isms, then you're a weak Christian, you're a shallow Christian, or whatever, for not digging into the right theology. And so we equip these guys to go shoot down any view that is different from the one that that they've been taught. And in their pride and arrogance, any other viewpoint needs to be taken out. And that is particularly tempting to young men. So how often do we take young men, give them authority, give them training in a system, and then set them up for disputes and debates that are not gentle and that lead to dissension in the church? And I think we just set them up for the devil to have a heyday with them. I'm speaking from experience here. That was me. If we heeded Paul's instruction here of saying we're not going to take the new convert, we're not going to take the 25-year-old that maybe he came to Christ when he was 8, but he was very young. Maybe he came to Christ when he was 19 or 20 and then entered seminary. He's still a young Christian, and he hasn't met the other qualifications. We haven't had a chance to see him raise his kids and so on. He gets puffed up easily and is just easy pickings for the devil. I see this so much in young pastors, even young pastors who I look at and say, man, they have all the potential in the world. They're gifted. They are trying to be humble, but they don't realize the temptation to arrogance. They think they do. I did. And now I look back and say, I realized some of it, but I didn't realize all of it, and I gave in too often. But I'm right. I think we set men up for this with our current system. And I know some of you that are either, whether you're listening now or listening later, some of you are those young pastors. It's worth pondering here. Rob says, it is a trouble thing to see that there are men who become overseers after such little time in the faith, such Spurgeon. I may be wrong in this. Yep, they show some aptitude and or they get the training and we think they're good to go. That is the common MO, it seems to me. Dale says, the not quarrelsome requirement seems to clash with the modern insistence on owning heretics and fighting for the culture. Yeah, I think I agree, especially the words there, quarreling and fighting and so on. To speak truth and to have good discussions and try to persuade people, that's great. But so easily it becomes that quarreling attitude. If that's what you're saying, yeah, I would agree. Rob says history is littered with such cases. Isn't that the truth? All right, so there's the first one. The second one is maybe somewhat related. It's required of him, of the overseer, also to have a good testimony from those outside. In other words, unbelievers need to have a good view of the overseer, the witness, right? That's what a testimony is. The witness shares what he knows in a courtroom. The witness tells what he knows, what he saw with his own eyes. So outsiders, unbelievers, look at the man who is a candidate to be an overseer in the church of Jesus Christ, and they say, he's a good man. He's a man of integrity. I watched him with his wife and kids. I see how he talks to other neighbors. I see how he interacts in the neighborhood. He's a good man. Or a coworker. Yeah, I know this guy, and I've seen how he responds to authority and how he works hard, and he's honest. Right? The unbelievers can say, "Yep, he's a good man." Otherwise, he may fall into reproach and the snare of the devil. The devil sets a trap for him. Reproach. Right? Again, accusations. He's trying to be a leader in the church, and all of these people who know him outside of the church are saying, "Really? This guy's a leader in the church?" I mean, every time a woman walks by, I see him in his front window staring out and watching her all the way down the street. This guy? I see him at the office, stealing things, lying to the boss, womanizing, flirting with the secretaries. This guy's a leader in the church? Really? And the snare, the trap that is laid out there because he's not lived with integrity and righteousness in front of all kinds of people. And now he's trying to lead the church. And now the church has to deal with this. And these accusations come, which Paul will describe how to handle accusations later. And they're going to come. They always come to church leaders. But you're setting the man and the church up for strife and turmoil and reproach if you bring a man into this role who already is being accused of all kinds of things by those outside the church. So don't bring that. Don't make it easy for the devil to set the trap and to reproach the man. Does that make sense? You tracking with that? All right, so let me pull back a bit. How much time does your church give to evaluating men according to these principles, these requirements, when they or before they put them in a position of overseer? Do you know? Does your church make this public? Do they let you speak into it? I mean, how are you going to know today if a potential overseer has a good reputation with those outside the home? Don't you need to talk to some of them? Doesn't somebody need to talk to some of them? I think the church would be so much stronger if we took these qualifications seriously, if we got rid of the seminary track, which are just institutions that train in systematic theology, if we got rid of the offices of senior pastor and associate pastor and youth pastor, all of that, and found men, sought for men who meet these qualifications. Think about how much stronger and more faithful our churches would be. And we get away from the programs and the formal ministries, those kind of things. I'm curious, would you, and I don't mean this to be a long answer, just I'm curious, those of you who are live here with us, do you know at your church, do you know that men are evaluated carefully according to these requirements, and do you all as the people get to speak into that? Or if you are an overseer, did your church scrutinize you according to these things? Dale says, a common rebuttal. The Apostle Paul was regularly hated, persecuted, and stoned, so my favorite celebrity pastor's rudeness and the resulting social pushback is excused. Well, yes, which obviously, even as you stated there, the differences are stark, aren't they? Yeah, it's Paul was rude at times. Jesus was rude at times. So, rudeness is not automatically disqualifying. There is a place, at least as we look at the examples, there is a place for strong words from leaders. However, they are hurled in Jesus and Paul, they are hurled at true enemies of the faith. So many guys today think that anyone who disagrees with them theologically is an enemy, and it's okay to hurl insult. You see this on social media all the time, right? The Christian nationalists and all that's going on there. And that's silly. So there were also times that Paul was very gentle and patient. And so your favorite celebrity pastor, we need to make sure that how do you even evaluate a celebrity pastor outside of, what we see in the videos, right? David Bickerfan says, at my old gathering, maybe 1 year evaluation, and congregants can speak into the process all along the way. That's good. That sounds like it's in the right path. Rob says, not a very good argument, really. What are you speaking there to, Rob? Dale says, before my time, the pastor had expenses paid for 6 months while examined in life. He was from another state. More recently, lay elders have been around long enough for us to get an idea. Yeah, and again, the whole system of having a senior guy so often hired from abroad, that does make this whole thing more difficult. Anyway, do you see the point? Do you see the dangers Paul's warning of here, and how we really do need to hold men to these standards if we're going to strengthen the church and have leaders who are equipped is not the right word, who meet these qualifications and so on. Rob says, I think the evaluation part needs to be thought through very carefully as what it involves. Yeah, I agree. Larry says, what a mess. That's true of a lot of things. All right, well, we'll leave it there for now. I would encourage you to encourage your church leaders when the time comes, when new leaders are being considered. Make sure the elders give due consideration to this, and the people. And if you are aspiring to be an elder or an overseer, look at yourself and see how you add up, and then humbly go before the people and saying, yeah, I want to be examined according to these kinds of things. The church needs men like this to lead us. All right. Have a great day, everyone. We will see you tomorrow, and we'll look at some of the qualifications for deacons and ask the question, what is a deacon actually supposed to be doing? So talk about that tomorrow. Grace and peace to you.